So in 1648, a group of white male colonizers who ostensibly looked kind of like me, but weren't exactly like me for some kind of key reasons. For those of you who don't know, I'm transgender, and I doubt these men were, but you never know. These white male colonizers gathered in a home here in what is now Malden to create the first church of the area that would later then become this church. And in doing so, they laid the foundation for creating a town, the town of Malden. Back in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, you needed a church to create a town, and so they did. Now, they weren't Unitarians or Universalists or Unitarian Universalists. No, they were Puritans, who ostensibly looked like many of us, but were different in many key ways. They shared almost no theology with us today. Namely, they believed that only a few important people would be saved in the next life, that there was nothing that they or anyone else could do about it. Pretty different from our beliefs here, that everyone has inherent worth and dignity, that what happens in this life is more important than any life that may or may not come afterwards. But they did believe that they were bound by a covenant, which is just a fancy religious word for promise or vows like you take in a marriage. A covenant with their God. But still, they believed that it was the community that kept the covenant, that the spiritual health of the whole community was important, not simply one's individual relationship with God. And though we have varying beliefs here now about the existence of gods or God or what we even mean by that word, we do believe the spiritual health of our whole community is important. And we do believe that it's our community that keeps our covenant. You see, the Puritans were escaping religious persecution in Europe, and that's why they came to create new religious institutions here in New England. That's part of it, despite who might have already been here. They came here to live their own ideas of what religion was, which, though I wouldn't say we're currently persecuted, is similar to our ideas of rethinking what religion means, of co-creating a faith not about shared beliefs, but values. The Puritans' covenant with God centered around obeying moral law, which we probably wouldn't agree with. They weren't okay with people like laughing outside in the world when they were walking around. We like to have fun, that's important. But also their covenant was a promise to do the work of the faith, which meant to love God, yes, but it also meant to love each other, to uphold justice and mercy. Now, they believed that if this covenant was broken, the whole community would feel God's wrath. Talk about collective punishment. But there's something there, these ancestors of ours, despite having nothing in common with us, it would seem, there's something there that can be tied together with them through covenant, right? Through loving each other, through upholding justice and mercy. This idea of covenant with God is based on the Bible, where God makes covenants with various prophets like Noah and Moses. With Noah, you might remember of Noah's Ark fame. It's something like, don't be bad, and I won't flood the world again. A little ambiguous, but okay. God promises Moses that if they follow the 10 commandments, they will have blessings, but if not, curses. Eventually, according to the Christian scriptures, Jesus comes along and creates a new covenant with God, one that forgives all sin. Of course, it required just the torture and death of Jesus, but it's a promise between God and all people. Our ancestors didn't see it that way. They didn't include all people. It didn't extend to the indigenous here on the land or those who'd be enslaved by members of this congregation. On the contrary, the covenant was used to think of those who were in the congregation as part of the in-group and those who were outside of it as not. those who were able and allowed to follow the covenant and those who weren't. It wouldn't be another 200 years when this congregation became Universalist and tried to practice this idea that there was no one outside the circle of God's love, that those who weren't Christian would even start to be considered as part of this salvation of all people. Now, I'm going to stop talking about God for a minute because a belief in God or gods is not what unites us here. Our covenant is a promise to each other. We have a covenant within this congregation and one that we share with all Unitarian Universalist congregations. We call them our shared values, which put love at the center of all we do, not our relationship with God. And it highlights justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity, values we will be exploring in depth over the course of this year. Our covenants are part of what makes us you, make us able to be in community with each other. We don't come together because we have the same beliefs. We don't have doctrines or creeds, but shared agreements that help us practice what it means to be in community together, centered on love. Our covenants make us proud, and they should. We should be proud of the work that's been put into these agreements, these promises, this covenant we have with each other. Now, Aisha read our full covenant for us, one that was created with the love and care of those who were members of our congregation in 2010 and those who are no longer here. It's an artifact, a gift from our spiritual ancestors, a statement from those we love who are still among us. These are the promises we make each Sunday and the promises we share each Sunday with each other, with those who are members and those who are not. I know we have some visitors who are here to our congregation because they've signed their children up for OWL, so we're so excited to have you today. But we still read this covenant together, even though we're not all members of this church. And we read the entire thing, the unabridged covenant, together when we have new members join us officially. But how often do we really think about honoring this covenant? I mean, really, right? I don't. Sorry. I mean, not deeply, right? I nod along, yeah, and I agree. Yeah, I agree with it. And don't get me wrong, right? But do I turn to it in times of conflict? Am I dealing with disagreements constructively? Am I being direct? This is especially hard for me as I'm Canadian. And I'll let you non-Canadians in on a secret. We might seem very polite, but that might be a mask for us being passive-aggressive. I swear I'm working on this. My wife, Amy, is not here right now. She took our kids to RE. Oh, there she is. She's like, what are you talking about? You can ask her after service if I'm working on being more direct. And yes. But I need to think about this in the context of the congregation, right? Is there a way that do I call people back into the circle of covenant? Do I do this lovingly? Do I think about it? Are there ways that I could make this covenant a spiritual practice, part of my spiritual practice, that we all could? Over the summer, we had a really lovely summer service where we practiced Lectio Divina about this covenant, which is a practice that came from monks where you slowly read through something, right? So we slowly read through this covenant. We took about 20 minutes of deep, personal, quiet reflection. Now, I'm not going to make you do that right now. But it pulled out for us some unexpected phrases that were meaningful. For some of us, myself included, it was the phrase of lovingly calling each other back into covenant. But it was different for others. It gave me newfound respect for those who worked so hard to put it together 15 years ago. Which brings me to my next point. One of our goals this year as a congregation is to rewrite this covenant. Now, we've been in touch with the Unitarian Universalist Association, who has some wonderful resources around this, and they've shared with us this idea of a liberating covenant versus what one might call a punitive covenant. Now, I don't think of our covenant that way, but sometimes a covenant can be used, like our ancestors did, to designate who is inside the covenant and who is outside. If I can't care for somebody in a time of need because I have my own needs that are taking over my life, will I be called out for that? What about if I don't express gratitude appropriately? Reverend Erica Barron, who works for the New England region of the Unitarian Universalist Association, says about liberating covenants, it's not the exact wording that makes the difference between limiting and liberating covenants, it's the way they're used. So I want us to think about how we engage these promises with each other, because I believe that that can inform this year-long process of recovenanting. Our ideas of how we want to interact and create these covenants and promises with each other, when we do that, right, it's often based on what we feel like we need to be in community. And I want to invite us to think about what it would be like to look at this covenant and think about what we can offer instead. Now, I want to invite you to take a look at the covenant in front of you. I know we ran out of orders of service. Aisha here has some. We also have some at the front. So if you need a covenant, raise your hand. We'll also put a link in the chat for that, those online. I want to invite you to take a look at this covenant in front of you and think about what you feel you can offer from it. I don't think everybody has pens. There's a bunch of pens up here, but I didn't hand them out, which is fine. Actually, could we hand them out? Can I get a volunteer to help hand those pens out? Awesome, Karen, thank you. Way to be in covenant. Okay, so what I want you to do, not just now in the service, is to think about underlining some of those things in the covenant you feel like you can offer. And if you are visiting us, I want to hear your opinion too, right? If you're from a different congregation, I'd love to hear how things are in your congregation. And you can take some time to do this. And you can also turn it over and think about things you can offer there. We're going to take just a short moment, not 20 minutes, a very short moment, to do a little bit of reading of that and underlining and writing on the other side. And then I invite you to do that as you want for the rest of the service, during music and other times you might feel moved. And if you want to, we would love to see you hand that in for us at the end. You can put your name on it or not. This is what we want to hear. This is the start of our year-long process. So let's take a short moment to do that. Apologies for the homework. Back to school time, that's right. And if you're online, you can also share your comments in the chat, or you can also just email them to me, just auto@fpmalden.org. You can do both. Yeah. All right, I'm going to invite everybody. I can see you all still writing, some of you. I'm going to invite you to continue to take a look at that over the course of the service, over the course of our year. And if you have things over the course of the service that come to you, write them down and place it on our table over here, and we'll be sure to take a look at it. This isn't the only time that we're going to have to share on our covenant this year as well. People have different ways that they can connect with things. So I want you to know that there's lots of opportunities as we create this new liberating covenant together. We want to find time to be really thoughtful and think through this. And this is the beginning of this new covenant. A new covenant that will help us inform big decisions that we have to make in the future about who we are as a people and hope to be together as a people, as a community, as we practice who we want to be in this world, how we want to engage with the world. And I want to think about particularly this place where we talk about disagreements. Our congregation is growing right now, and that's a beautiful thing to witness. But with that growth, we will see this emergence of different ideas. The larger the congregation, the less likely it is that everyone will agree. And so we will think about how we deal with those disagreements when we find ourselves in difficult ones. Do we look to our covenant as a guide? Because we should. Conflict, when done well, can be generative, creative. It can bring our community closer together. It can strengthen our bonds and relationships, to know that we're not in it for ourselves alone, but to honor the covenant and this larger community we belong to, that we claim and that has claimed us. So as we grow, we invite you into this process. This congregation doesn't belong to me. It doesn't belong to the board or the Unitarian Universalist Association. It belongs to those who are part of it, all of you. So we invite you into the process of this service. So the most beautiful thing I think about this process over the next year is we get to use this covenant as our guide for creating it. This gift from those among us who were here for that process. We are a covenantal faith, one that believes that these promises we make to each other are the core of who we are, and do so in love. So let us live in to the liberation of that promise. May it be so, and let us say together, Amen. Amen.